Welcome in today. We're taking a closer look at a Lincoln wheat penny, whose smallest details could reveal why serious collectors pay such close attention. Step 1. The 1942 Lincoln wheat penny looks, at first glance, like a small and familiar piece of American pocket change. But its real story begins with the tiny letter D beneath Lincoln's portrait. That mint mark places this cent at the Denver Mint during one of the most consequential years in American history, when the United States was fully committed to World War II, and every part of the economy was being reshaped by wartime demands. The coin itself is not automatically rare simply because it is more than 8 decades old, and that distinction is critical for anyone evaluating one today. Millions were produced and many survived, but the condition, color, strike, variety, and authenticity of an individual example can transform its collector appeal. Later, we will examine what authenticated examples have actually brought at auction, including an extraordinary result that dramatically exceeded ordinary collector prices, and we will break down exactly why one 1942D can be worth little more than a modest collectible, while another can attract serious attention from advanced Lincoln cent specialists. The fascinating part is that the answer is not hidden in the date alone. It is buried in the tiny details preserved on the metal, the quality of the original strike, the surfaces that survived decades of circulation, and sometimes even the way the Denver mint mark was punched into the die. When the 1942 D cent entered production, America was living through a period unlike almost anything the country had experienced before. The United States had entered World War II in December 1941, and by 1942 factories, transportation networks, raw materials, labor, and consumer goods were increasingly being directed toward the war effort. Pennies remained essential to everyday commerce, however, and the Denver Mint continued striking Lincoln cents in enormous quantities. The 1942 D issue had a reported mintage of 60,740,000 pieces, a substantial production run that explains why ordinary circulated examples are not considered rare. Yet mintage is only the beginning of the rarity story. A coin can have tens of millions struck and still become difficult to locate in exceptional preservation because the overwhelming majority entered commerce. NGC notes that wartime-era demand for cents was enormous, and that production pressure contributed to die wear, meaning collectors should be selective when looking for sharply struck examples. The Denver Mint itself gives the D its importance. It identifies the facility responsible for producing the coin rather than indicating a special denomination or metal composition. For collectors building a complete Lincoln wheat cent set, the 1942 D is therefore an important day 10 mint mark combination, but its true premium emerges when an individual coin possesses qualities that separate it from the enormous population of ordinary survivors. Physically, the 1942 D is a classic bronze Lincoln cent measuring approximately 19 millimeters across and weighing about 3.11 grams, with a plain, non-reeded edge. Its composition was approximately 95% copper, with the balance consisting primarily of tin and zinc, the traditional bronze alloy used for Lincoln cents before the extraordinary wartime change that would come in 1943. On the obverse is Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right, surrounded by liberty and the date, with "In God We Trust" positioned above his head. The reverse carries the familiar wheatear design that gave the entire series its popular name, United States of America across the upper portion, EPLURIBUS UNUM above the denomination, and 1 cent between the two stylized wheat stalks. Brenner's design had been introduced decades earlier, in 1909, yet by 1942 it had already become deeply embedded in American monetary life. The bronze composition also matters today because copper reacts with its environment over time. Original surfaces can gradually change from bright red to reddish brown, and eventually brown depending on exposure, storage conditions, handling, and chemical interaction. That is why two otherwise similar 1942D cents can have very different appearances and collector appeal. A coin with original mintred color preserved across its surfaces can command substantially more interest than a circulated brown example, but color alone is never enough. Collectors also examine luster, marks, strike, surface quality, and authenticity. That brings the investigation to the area where experienced Lincoln cent collectors become especially careful: condition. A circulated 1942D may show wear across Lincoln's cheek, jaw, hair, and the highest portions of the wheat ears, while a mint-state example retains its original detail because it never experienced normal commercial wear. Professional grading services use numerical grades to communicate the condition of certified coins, with mint-state grades generally beginning at MS60 and progressing upward as surface preservation, luster, strike, and overall quality improve. Color designation adds another important layer for copper coins. Brown, or BN, indicates that the coin has predominantly brown surfaces. Red-brown, or RB, reflects a mixture of original red and later brown coloration. And red, or RD, identifies a coin retaining the required level of original red appearance. But the difference between MS65 RD and MS67 RD can be enormous even though both are technically uncirculated. Tiny contact marks, weak design detail, spots, carbon flecks, or dull areas can prevent a coin from reaching the next grade. The 1942D is particularly interesting because NGC specifically cautions collectors to look for sharply struck examples, noting that increased production led to die overuse. This is where rarity becomes more sophisticated than simply counting surviving coins. There may be plenty of 1942D cents overall, yet far fewer examples combine high numerical grade, strong strike, attractive original color, clean surfaces, and excellent eye appeal. That combination is what serious collectors compete for. The next level of interest comes from varieties, especially repunched mint marks. Unlike modern cents, where mint marks were incorporated into working dies during the manufacturing process, earlier Lincoln cents could receive manually punched mint marks, creating opportunities for distinctive varieties when the punch was applied more than once in slightly different positions. For the 1942D Lincoln cent, recognized repunch mint mark varieties include FS502 and FS504, with specialists studying the secondary impressions around the D for evidence of the additional punch. NGC describes two distinct repunch mint mark forms for this issue, including one showing the secondary impression south of the primary mint mark and another showing it toward the east. PCGS also catalogs multiple 1942D repunch mint mark varieties, including FS502 and FS504, demonstrating that the D deserves close inspection rather than being treated as an insignificant letter. Auction evidence shows why these varieties can matter. One authenticated 1942DD FS502 example in MS67 RD brought $1,130 at David Lawrence Rare Coins in July 2022. That is a useful lesson in collector economics. A normal 1942D is not transformed into a four-figure coin merely because someone believes the mint mark looks unusual. The variety must be genuine, identifiable, and properly attributed, and the grade must support the premium. A suspected RPM that disappears under magnification, lighting, or expert examination may have no special value at all. For serious collectors, attribution is therefore more important than imagination. Authentication becomes especially important when a coin is being represented as an expensive rarity. A genuine 1942D should display the correct dimensions, weight, metal characteristics, lettering style, date placement, mint mark appearance, and design details expected from a Denver-produced Lincoln cent. A scale accurate to at least 1/100th of a gram can be useful for preliminary screening, while digital calipers can help confirm diameter, but neither tool can independently prove authenticity. Experienced collectors examine surfaces for unnatural tooling, altered mint marks, added or removed metal, suspicious coloration, plating, artificial tunning, and other signs that a coin may have been manipulated. Magnification is particularly useful around the date, mint mark, lettering, and high points of Lincoln's portrait. A suspected repunched mint mark should be compared against established reference photographs and diagnostic characteristics rather than judged from a casual glance. This is also where professional certification can become financially sensible if the coin appears unusually high grade or represents a potentially valuable variety. The certification holder does not magically create rarity. Instead, an established grading service provides an independent assessment of authenticity and condition. Collectors should also be cautious with dramatic online claims. A listing price is not the same thing as an auction result. An asking price is not necessarily a market price, and an uncertified coin advertised as a rare variety deserves considerably more scrutiny than a properly attributed piece from a respected grading service. These distinctions protect collectors from paying a premium based on an attractive story rather than measurable numismatic evidence. The actual market history of the 1942 D reveals just how sharply value can diverge depending on the individual coin. For an ordinary certified mint state example, prices can remain surprisingly modest. PCGS records a 1942 D MS67 RD example, selling for $119 at Heritage Auctions in April 2023, while another NGC MS67 RD example sold for $160 through David Lawrence Rare Coins in March 2023. Those results are important because they immediately challenge the idea that every exceptionally old wheat penny must be worth thousands. Even a beautiful MS67 RD can trade for well under $1,000. By contrast, recognized repunch mintmark examples can command much stronger premiums when the variety and grade align. The FS502 MS67 RD result of $1,130 is a documented example. And then there is the extreme end of the market. PCGS lists an auction record of $12,650 for a 1942 D1C graded MS68 RD, sold by Heritage Auctions in December 2008. That extraordinary figure should never be interpreted as the normal value of a 1942 D penny. It represents an unusually high-grade, professionally authenticated coin, and demonstrates how dramatically registry-level quality can change the economics of a common date issue. In practical terms, a collector might encounter a certified example around $100 to $200, a desirable attributed variety around $1,100, or an unusually premium coin in the low thousands depending on grade, variety, color, provenance, and market conditions, while the exceptional MS68 RD auction record stands in a completely different category. The lesson is simple. Value follows the individual coin, not merely the label 1942D. For anyone who discovers a 1942D Lincoln wheat penny today, preservation should come before valuation. Do not clean it, polish it, rub it with a cloth, dip it in household chemicals, or attempt to brighten dark copper surfaces. Cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and may turn an otherwise desirable coin into a problem piece with diminished collector appeal. Handle the cent by its edges whenever possible, keep fingerprints away from the surfaces, and store it in an inert, archival quality holder designed for coins rather than loose plastic, paper envelopes containing harmful chemicals, or containers that trap moisture. Stable temperature and low humidity are especially important for copper because environmental exposure can accelerate discoloration and surface deterioration. If the coin appears circulated, its value may be primarily historical and collectible rather than extraordinary. If it appears unusually sharp, retains strong original red color, or shows a convincing repunched mint mark, professional examination becomes much more worthwhile. The most important question is not whether every 1942D is rare. It clearly is not. But whether a particular survivor possesses the combination of authenticity, preservation, variety, strike quality, and collector demand that the market rewards. That is why this little Denver cent remains fascinating more than 80 years after it was made. Millions were struck, countless pieces passed through American commerce during a world-changing era, and yet the finest survivors and properly attributed varieties tell a very different story. The 1942 D. Lincoln wheat penny is ultimately a lesson in numismatics itself. Rarity is not simply how old a coin is or how few were originally made. Rarity is the intersection of survival, condition, originality, distinctive characteristics, and competition among collectors. Its modest size conceals a remarkably detailed history, and its market value can range from a small premium for an ordinary example to four figures for a genuinely special variety or exceptional specimen, with the rarest certified grades reaching far beyond that range. Every serious evaluation begins with the same discipline. Identify the coin accurately, inspect the details carefully, verify any claimed variety, protect the original surfaces, and let documented evidence rather than wishful thinking determine what the coin is truly worth. Step 2. There is something deceptively ordinary about a 1946 Lincoln wheat penny. More than 750 million Lincoln cents were struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco that year, placing the issue firmly in the realm of widely produced post-war coinage. Yet that enormous production does not tell the whole story. The 1946 cent belongs to a fascinating transition point in American history, arriving just after the end of World War II, when factories were shifting away from wartime production and millions of Americans were returning to civilian life. For collectors, the coin becomes even more interesting when its surfaces, color, strike, mint mark, or die characteristics are examined under magnification. Some survivors are ordinary circulated cents with modest premiums, while exceptional pieces can become highly desirable registry set coins or recognized varieties. Later, we will look at authenticated auction results and the specific characteristics that have pushed individual 1946 Lincoln cents into four-figure territory. The important point is that the date itself does not create extraordinary value. The real investigation begins with identifying which 1946 cent you have, determining where it was made, examining how well it survived, and discovering whether the tiny details on its surfaces place it among the more collectible survivors of this enormous issue. To understand why the 1946 cent matters, it helps to step into the America that produced it. Victory in Europe had come in May 1945. Japan surrendered in August, and by 1946, the United States was confronting the enormous task of converting an economy built for global war back toward peacetime production. Millions of servicemen were being discharged, industries were reorganizing, consumer demand was rising, and shortages and inflationary pressures remained part of everyday economic life. The Lincoln cent was an essential denomination in that environment because small coins were constantly moving through stores, transportation systems, vending machines, banks, and household commerce. Three facilities produced the 1946 issue. Philadelphia struck 991,655,000 cents without a mint mark. Denver produced 315,690,000 bearing the D. And San Francisco struck 198,100,000 carrying an S. The combined production was therefore enormous, but the three mints did not create identical collector populations. The Philadelphia issue is particularly common in circulated grades because of its massive output, while the Denver and San Francisco pieces provide collectors with separate mint mark challenges. The absence of a mint mark on a 1946 cent is therefore not evidence of a missing letter or manufacturing mistake. It indicates Philadelphia production. This distinction is fundamental when assembling a Lincoln wheat cent collection, because date and mint mark together establish the coin's basic identity before rarity or condition can even be considered. Physically, the 1946 Lincoln cent follows the classic bronze specifications that define the wheat reverse series. The standard coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams, measures 19 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge rather than the reeded edge seen on many larger American denominations. Its bronze composition is approximately 95% copper, with the remainder consisting primarily of zinc and tin, giving the coin the warm copper appearance that collectors associate with pre-1982 Lincoln cents. The obverse carries Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right, with Liberty beside the portrait, In God We Trust above, and the date positioned beneath Lincoln. The design is more than decorative. Lincoln's portrait transformed the cent into a small piece of national memory, honoring a president whose leadership during the Civil War and role in preserving the Union had already become deeply embedded in American identity. Turn the coin over and the imagery changes completely. Two wheat ears frame the central inscriptions, creating the familiar design that inspired the name Wheat Penny. United States of America surrounds the upper field. EPLURIBUS UNUM appears above 1 cent, and the wheat stalks create a visual border suggesting agricultural strength and prosperity. Brenner's original design had debuted in 1909, making the 1946 cent part of a nearly 4-decade artistic tradition. By the time this particular coin was struck, Americans had seen the same Lincoln portrait circulate through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and enormous changes in American society. The manufacturing process helps explain why preservation varies so dramatically among surviving 1946 cents. Copper planchets were prepared to the proper specifications before being fed into coinage presses, where dies struck the obverse and reverse designs with tremendous force. Fresh dies could produce crisp details and lively mint luster, but as dies experienced repeated use, subtle changes in appearance could emerge. The quality of the strike matters because a coin can technically remain uncirculated while still showing weakness in certain design areas. Collectors therefore inspect Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat details, the wheat ears, lettering, and other high points for evidence of sharp definition. Luster is equally important. Original mint luster is the microscopic surface texture created during striking, and it can give an untouched copper cent a vibrant, almost glowing appearance when rotated under proper lighting. Once a coin enters circulation, friction gradually removes that original texture from the highest points. Copper also undergoes chemical changes over time, so collectors classify color as brown, red-brown, or red. A brown coin has largely lost its original red appearance. Red-brown retains a mixture of red and brown, and a red example preserves a substantial amount of its original mint color. This distinction can have a major financial effect, particularly in high grades. A visually attractive MS65RD or MS66RD can be far more desirable than a technically similar brown coin, but professional grading considers much more than color. Marks, spots, carbon strike, luster, surface originality, and overall eye appeal all influence the final assessment. That is where the concept of rarity becomes much more complicated than the original mintage numbers suggest. A 1946 cent in worn condition is not generally difficult to locate, and even many uncirculated pieces remain accessible to collectors. The real challenge is finding an example that combines exceptional preservation with desirable color and strong eye appeal. Professional grading services use the mint state scale for coins that show no conventional circulation where, progressing upward through grades such as MS60, MS61, MS62, MS63, MS64, MS65, MS66, and beyond when the coin's condition justifies it. At the upper end, tiny imperfections that would barely matter on a circulated cent can become decisive. A single distracting carbon spot, contact mark, haze, or area of dull luster may prevent a coin from reaching a coveted grade. This explains why population reports matter to advanced collectors. PCGS records the 1946 Philadelphia cent as having substantial certified populations across many grades, illustrating that the basic issue is readily represented in the grading population rather than being intrinsically scarce. Yet the population at the very highest grades becomes far more important because collectors competing for registry sets often want not merely a 1946 cent, but one of the finest known representatives with the correct color designation. A collector might therefore encounter a certified 1946 cent for a relatively modest amount, while a superb red specimen with unusually strong preservation can move into four-figure territory. In this part of the market, the word rare must always be attached to something specific: rare grade, rare color combination, rare variety, rare error, or rare preservation, not simply an old date. The 1946 series becomes particularly intriguing when the mint marks are examined closely, because recognized varieties exist within the year. NGC's Variety Plus listings identify two 1946 DD Repunch Mintmark varieties and several important San Francisco varieties, including an inverted S and the 1946 SD over Mintmark variety, FS511. These are genuine die varieties, not random damage. A repunched mintmark can occur when a mintmark is applied more than once to a working die, and the subsequent impression does not perfectly overlap the first. An over mintmark, meanwhile, preserves evidence of one mintmark being placed over another. The 1946 SD FS511 is especially noteworthy because it has documented auction activity at levels far above ordinary 1946 cents. PCGS records a certified MS66 plus RD example selling for $3,173 at Legend Rare Coin Auctions in September 2019, while another documented example appears in the condition census with a $1,293 Stax Bowers result. Those figures are not appropriate values for every 1946 cent, and they should never be used to inflate the value of a Philadelphia 1946 cent merely because both coins share the same year. They reflect a specific, attributed variety combined with exceptional condition and collector demand. The same principle applies to errors. A genuine major mint error can be collectible, but an ordinary scratch, gouge, flattened mint mark, or damaged edge is not automatically an error. Specialists compare suspected anomalies against known die characteristics and minting processes before assigning a premium. Authentication becomes critical once a coin appears valuable enough to justify serious attention. A genuine 1946 cent should conform to the established measurements: weight, lettering, portrait, reverse design, metal characteristics, and mintmark style appropriate to its issue. A precision scale can help identify obvious weight discrepancies, while magnification can reveal suspicious tooling, altered surfaces, fabricated mintmarks, or damage masquerading as a variety. But these preliminary checks are not substitutes for professional authentication. Copper is especially vulnerable to artificial alteration because collectors value original red color, creating an incentive for unethical attempts to brighten, recolor, chemically treat, or otherwise manipulate coins. A cleaned coin may appear unusually shiny while lacking the natural luster produced during striking. Likewise, an added or altered mint mark can deceive someone who is unfamiliar with genuine punch characteristics. For a potentially important variety, professional attribution is far safer than relying on internet photographs or a casual comparison. The collector should also remember that an asking price has no authority by itself. A seller can advertise an ordinary 1946 cent for thousands of dollars, but that does not establish market value. Documented auction results from recognized firms and certified populations provide much stronger evidence. This is particularly important because some 1946 varieties have substantial collector premiums, while ordinary examples remain comparatively inexpensive. A genuine 1946 DD variety, for instance, belongs to a very different collecting category from a damaged Philadelphia cent that merely appears to contain a doubled letter. Careful identification protects both the coin and the collector. The auction record ultimately reveals the most important lesson about the 1946 Lincoln wheat penny. Extraordinary prices belong to extraordinary coins. PCGS records a $14,950 auction result for a 1946 Philadelphia cent in an exceptionally high certified grade, sold by Heritage Auctions in January 2006. That result is dramatically outside the normal market for the date, and should be understood as a record-setting high-grade event rather than a representative price for an ordinary survivor. At the other end of the spectrum, PCGS records a certified MS-65 RD 1946 cent selling for only $10 through David Lawrence Rare Coins in March 2020, illustrating how little the date alone guarantees. Even within the broader uncirculated market, the difference between a typical high-grade example and a finest quality coin can be enormous. A genuinely premium 1946 cent might bring roughly $1,200. Another exceptional certified example could reach around $2,650, while an important variety or top-tier specimen might approach $3,800 when the right combination of grade, originality, color, and competitive bidding is present. Those figures should be viewed as illustrative ranges rather than promises, because coin markets change and individual auction results depend on the exact specimen. The 1946D and 1946S issues also demonstrate this principle in different ways. PCGS records a 1946D MS 67 plus RD result of $3,120 in January 2025, while the specialized 1946 SD FS 511 variety reached $3,173 in an earlier documented sale. For anyone examining a 1946 Lincoln wheat penny today, preservation is therefore the final part of the story. Never polish or chemically clean the copper, avoid touching the fields with bare fingers, and store the coin in an inert holder away from moisture and unstable environmental conditions. A collector should begin with identification, then examine the mint mark, surfaces, color, strike, and potential variety, and only after those questions have been answered should value enter the discussion. The 1946 cent is compelling precisely because its enormous production did not prevent a hierarchy from developing among its survivors. Most are ordinary reminders of post-war America, but a small number possess the combination of originality, condition, variety, and appeal that serious collectors pursue. That is what gives this humble Lincoln wheat penny its enduring place in American numismatics, not the promise that every old cent is a fortune, but the far more fascinating truth that careful examination can reveal meaningful differences hidden within coins that, at first glance, appear almost identical. Step 3. There is a particular moment that happens when a collector turns a 1946 Lincoln wheat penny under a strong light and stops looking at it as ordinary pocket change. The first thing visible is Abraham Lincoln, familiar and unmistakable, but beneath his portrait sits a small S that quietly changes the investigation. That single mint mark connects this cent to the San Francisco Mint and to a period when America was emerging from the enormous machinery of World War II. Millions of these pennies were struck, so the date alone does not make the coin scarce. What makes certain survivors fascinating is everything that happened after the dies struck the planchet. How sharply the design was impressed, whether the copper retained its original color, whether circulation left marks across Lincoln's cheek and jaw, whether the surfaces still carry natural mint luster, and whether the tiny mint mark reveals a recognized die variety. Some examples are simply historic wheat cents, while others become serious targets for specialists assembling high-grade sets or variety collections. As we examine this coin more closely, the investigation will reveal why collectors pay attention to details that most people would never notice, what separates an ordinary 1946 S from an exceptional one, and why authenticated examples with the right combination of rarity, grade, originality, and eye appeal have reached impressive levels in the collector market. Before judging the coin in your hand, it helps to understand the world in which it was born. The year 1946 was America's first full year after the end of World War II, and the transition was anything but simple. Soldiers were returning home, wartime factories were being converted to civilian production, housing and consumer demand were rising, and the economy was adjusting after years in which materials and manufacturing capacity had been heavily directed toward military needs. The Lincoln cent remained an essential part of everyday commerce, and San Francisco continued producing cents for circulation throughout the year. The 1946 S had a reported mintage of 198,100,000 pieces, substantially fewer than the nearly 1 billion cents struck at Philadelphia that year, but still far too many to classify the ordinary issue as genuinely rare. The S beneath Lincoln identifies San Francisco production. It is not an error, and its presence is essential to correctly identifying the coin. That distinction becomes especially important when comparing the three 1946 issues, because collectors do not treat Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco examples as interchangeable. A complete Lincoln wheat cent collection demands each date and mint mark combination, and San Francisco issues have their own populations, strike characteristics, varieties, and condition rarities. PCGS lists the 1946 S at 198.1 million pieces and records estimated survival in the millions across circulated grades, reinforcing the idea that the ordinary coin is plentiful, while the real scarcity appears at the upper levels of preservation and within specialized varieties. Now look at the coin itself, because its physical specifications establish the baseline for authentication. The 1946 S Lincoln cent is a bronze coin weighing approximately 3.11 grams and measuring 19 millimeters in diameter, with a plain edge. Its alloy is listed as 95% copper, with the remaining portion composed of tin and zinc. That copper-rich composition is one reason the coin can develop such dramatic differences in appearance after decades of exposure. A freshly struck cent would have displayed vibrant copper-red surfaces, but environmental contact gradually changes copper's appearance, producing the brown and reddish-brown tones collectors encounter today. On the obverse, Victor David Brenner's portrait of Lincoln faces right, surrounded by the inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date. On the reverse, two wheat stalks frame the central inscriptions "United States of America," "EPLURIBUS and 1 cent. The wheat ears are more than an attractive border. They helped create the visual identity of an agricultural nation and gave this entire generation of Lincoln cents its enduring nickname, the wheat penny. Brenner's Lincoln portrait had already been in circulation for nearly 4 decades by 1946, meaning the coin was part of a design that had survived enormous national changes. Yet the design's familiarity can actually work against the casual observer. Because millions of Americans knew the Lincoln cent by sight, small manufacturing differences could easily disappear into the background of everyday use. For today's collector, those same tiny details become evidence of the minting process, the coin's survival, and sometimes the existence of a recognized variety. The next examination should be performed under angled light. Do not begin by asking what the coin is worth. Begin by asking what happened to its surfaces. On a circulated 1946 the first areas to show where are generally the highest portions of Lincoln's portrait and the reverse design. The cheek, jaw, hair details, and other exposed points can gradually lose their original texture as the coin passes through hands, cash registers, bags, and banking systems. On the reverse, the wheat ears and lettering can reveal friction and flattening. A coin that still has its original mint-state surface should behave differently under light. Tilt it slowly and look for cartwheel-like movement in the luster, while checking whether the high points retain their sharp definition. Then inspect the fields for contact marks. A coin can avoid circulation entirely and still acquire abrasions from being struck against other coins or handled during production and storage. This is why an MS-63, MS-64, MS-65, or MS-66 coin is not simply a matter of how shiny it looks. Professional grading evaluates the total condition, including marks, luster, strike, surfaces, and eye appeal. Color introduces another layer. Brown, or BN, describes coins whose surfaces have largely transitioned away from their original red appearance. Red-brown, or RB, represents an intermediate combination, and red, or RD, is reserved for coins retaining a high degree of original red coloration. For copper collectors, that distinction can be financially significant. A certified red specimen with clean surfaces and attractive luster may command dramatically more attention than a brown coin at a similar numerical grade. But color cannot rescue a coin with serious marks, cleaning, corrosion, or other surface problems. The experienced collector is always evaluating the entire coin rather than one attractive feature. And this is where the 1946S becomes more interesting than its mintage figure suggests. PCGS estimates roughly 19 million surviving examples across all grades, with far smaller estimated populations in higher preservation categories. Its published survival estimates for the standard issue place approximately 15,000 examples at MS-60 or better, and about 7,500 at MS-65 or better. Those are estimates, not a literal census of every surviving coin, but they illustrate the basic principle of condition rarity. There may be millions of 1946S cents surviving, yet only a fraction remain attractive enough to compete at the highest certified levels. This is why registry set collectors can become intensely interested in a coin that appears common to everyone else. A high-grade example must combine several qualities at once: strong strike, clean fields, pleasing color, natural luster, minimal carbon spotting, and an overall appearance that survives close inspection. A collector searching for a premium 1946S might reject dozens of technically uncirculated coins before finding one with the right combination. This also explains why value can rise sharply without the original mintage changing by a single coin. The rarity is no longer the number produced in 1946. It is the number that survived in exceptional condition. Auction records demonstrate the scale of that difference. PCGS records a 1946S MS-67 Plus RD example selling for $16,800 at Heritage Auctions on December 18, 2022. That is an extraordinary result and should be understood as a top-level condition event, not a normal valuation for a 1946S cent. It demonstrates what happens when collectors compete for a very high-grade example with exceptional preservation and original red color, but it should never lead anyone to assume that an ordinary circulated 1946S is remotely comparable. Now the magnifying glass becomes essential, because the mint mark itself can tell another story. The 1946S has several recognized varieties, including the inverted SFS501 and the important 1946SD over mint mark, cataloged as FS511. NGC's Variety Plus listings also identify additional recognized 1946S varieties, including an SS repunched mint mark and a ball serif S variety. The FS511 is particularly significant because it preserves evidence of a D mint mark beneath the S, indicating that the die was prepared using a previously punched mint mark and then received the San Francisco S PCGS catalogs the 1946 SD FS511 as a distinct variety in brown, and red designations, meaning collectors are not merely looking for something that looks doubled. They are identifying a specific documented die variety. One documented FS511 red example, graded MS66 plus RD, sold for $3,173 at Legend Rare Coin Auctions in September 2019, while PCGS lists a Stax Bowers example in MS66 plus RD that realized $1,293 in 2013. Those results explain why experienced collectors examine the mint mark so carefully. A normal scratch through the letter, a dent, or postment damage is not a variety. The diagnostic evidence must match established references. The inverted S FS501 is another recognized variety, but PCGS currently shows no auction record for the particular RB listing cited here, so a responsible collector should not invent a market value simply because the variety exists. The same caution applies to supposed mint errors. Genuine striking errors can be valuable when properly authenticated, but damage caused after the coin left the mint is vastly more common. A flattened rim, gouged surface, altered mint mark, or unusual discoloration should never be labeled a mint error without evidence. That distinction leads directly into authentication, perhaps the most important part of the investigation when a 1946 S appears unusually valuable. Start with the basics. Weigh the coin, confirm its diameter, examine the edge, and compare the lettering and portrait against a known genuine example. Then concentrate on the mint mark. The shape, placement, and diagnostic characteristics should correspond to the documented variety if one is being claimed. Magnification can reveal unnatural tooling around the S, suspicious metal movement, or evidence that someone has attempted to alter the coin. Pay special attention to surfaces that appear unnaturally bright. A cleaned copper cent may have a harsh, uniform shine rather than the soft, directional luster produced by the original striking process. Artificial color treatments can also fool inexperienced buyers, which is why professional certification becomes increasingly important as the potential value rises. A coin advertised for several $1,000s is not worth that amount simply because the seller says it is rare. A documented auction result is stronger evidence than an asking price, and a professional attribution is stronger evidence than a photograph posted in an online forum. This is particularly important with FS511 because the variety's premium depends on correctly identifying the underlying D, and the overlying SPCGS's auction data show that authenticated examples have reached roughly $1,300 to more than $3,000 depending on grade and color, while ordinary 1946 S cents can sell for dramatically less. For perspective, PCGS records a certified MS66 plus RD regular 1946 S at just $70 in a 2016 David Lawrence auction, while its general auction data show a much higher record for the finest regular issue. That contrast is the entire lesson in miniature. A four-figure result belongs to a specific coin with specific attributes, not to every coin sharing the same date and mint mark. If a 1946 S appears promising, protect it before doing anything else. Never polish it, rub it with a cloth, apply chemicals, or attempt to improve its color. Hold it by the edges, keep fingerprints away from the copper, and store it in an inert holder in a stable, dry environment. Preservation is not merely about appearance. It is about protecting the evidence that allows the market to judge the coin honestly. By the end of the examination, the 1946 S Lincoln wheat penny has transformed from a small bronze cent into something much more revealing, a physical record of post-war America, and a case study in how professional numismatics separates common coins from genuinely exceptional ones. The ordinary 1946 S is historically important but widely available, while the finest survivors and authenticated varieties occupy a very different collecting landscape. A normal circulated example may have only a modest collectible premium, and even many certified mint state pieces remain accessible, but an exceptional red coin, a top population specimen, or a properly attributed FS 511 over mint mark can enter a market where four-figure competition becomes realistic. For example, a collector might encounter a desirable certified variety around $1,450, a particularly strong high-grade specimen near $2,750, or an important, beautifully preserved variety approaching $3,900. But these are not guaranteed prices, and they should never be confused with a universal value for the date. The documented FS 511 result of $3,173 and the regular issue MS 67 plus RD record of $16,800 show how dramatically grade, variety, color, and competition can change the outcome. The long-term appeal of this coin comes from that layered story. It was struck at San Francisco when America was rebuilding after a global war. It carries Brenner's enduring portrait of Lincoln. It contains the bronze composition that defined the wheat cent. It passed through ordinary American commerce, and decades later, its tiny differences can become meaningful to specialists. When examining one yourself, follow the evidence in order. Confirm the 1946 date, verify the S, study the strike, inspect the surfaces, judge the color, look for original luster, examine the lettering and design details, investigate any possible variety or error, and only then consider market value. The most valuable discovery is not necessarily the coin with the most dramatic story attached to it. It is the coin whose story can be proven.